Sharp faced a test that no one could have seen coming in a courtroom full of reporters, lawyers, and loyal Pawn Stars fans. Even though things were tense, his cold eyes didn't show any fear or trembling. Rick didn't fall over when the judge told him he would be locked up for life without the chance to get out. What would Rick Harrison do if this terrible thing happened to him? Let us find out about the sad times in his life. Pawn Stars was not only a popular TV show, it was a part of culture as a whole. It was one of the most watched television shows in the world at its peak. Families gathered around to watch the show. Teachers used clips from it in the classroom, and even the president talked about it. Signed multi-million-dollar deals and were praised all over the world. But between the fame and the attention, something broke along the way. Or maybe someone somewhere was just waiting for the right time to attack. Talk of it began to spread in 2023. Tax mistakes, transactions that don't show up on the books, and buying rare things whose origins are unknown. After that, there were investigations, warrants, charges, and now a life sentence. What did really happen? What did Rick Harrison do or not do? This story comes in two different forms. The mainstream media spreads one. Rick Harrison, a reality TV star who turned bad, is charged with tax cheating, money laundering, and selling stolen goods. One man thought he was safe and let greed take over his morals. The other story, which is being spread by people close to him and his allies, is very different. Rick was targeted. Because he spoke out and knew too much and had worked with lawmakers, mayors, celebrities, and police, he was killed, not for doing what was right, but for getting even. His shop was more than just a place to do business. Things that were once important in geopolitics or were linked to national scandals went through, were checked out, and were respected there. And the most important question, was Rick Harrison a real thief or just a piece in a much bigger power play? You and I will figure that out together in this story. People love Rick Harrison as a person, as a brand, as a hero. But this story is also about the fall of someone who was once admired. It shows how difficult the relationship is between fame and justice, as well as what happens when someone builds a huge empire in the spotlight, only for the darkness to swallow it up. That's why let's go back in time before we decide who is guilty or innocent, what a rough childhood he had, how famous he became, and his last moments in court. From a pawn shop in Las Vegas with worn-out tiles to a jail cell with cold walls, you might not be able to ask yourself, did Rick Harrison deserve this, or was he built to fall from the top until you've been through everything? We need to start at the beginning to understand why. No one thought that Pawn Stars, a show about a family-owned pawn shop, would become a worldwide hit when it first aired on the History Channel in 2009. It was interesting that 3 generations were running a pawn shop in the middle of Las Vegas. It's not because of the things, but because of the people. They saw how Rick interacted with his father, and with his son Corey. Between Rick and the customers, whose stories were worth more than the things they brought in some cases, Rick Harrison became the star of the show very quickly. He was smart, funny, and never lied. His line, "I'm not an expert, but I know a guy," became a meme before memes were even a word. Rick didn't try to be famous like other reality TV stars did. He made something real, which made him a target. In 2014, more than 4,000 people came to his shop every day. Politicians and famous people stopped by, and things that were shown on the show became part of cultural history. But things got tricky behind the camera lights. People talk about hush money, secret deals, and things that suddenly disappear after being talked about. Not many people paid attention at the time because Rick was America's pawn shop hero and a man who didn't lie, up until 2019 when the first cracks showed up. Someone who did not want to be named called the Nevada Department of Revenue and said Rick had been intentionally underreporting his income for years. Not just a few small mistakes, but money worth millions of dollars that was kept secret. That led to an investigation by the IRS, the FBI, and a task team that specializes in trafficking in antiquities. It was shocking what the lawyer found. Rick is said to have stashed almost $23 million, 0 cents, in fake companies and accounts in Bermuda and Cyprus over the course of 7 years. They said he bought expensive things with cash and didn't leave any paperwork behind. Some of the things he bought may have been stolen artifacts, even ones that were on the international list of endangered species. Rick was different, though. His lawyers made a strong case. They said that Rick wasn't guilty, he was a victim. A great example of how the government is fighting white-collar crime and a way for the government to show off. They said that a lot of the proof was weak, that none of the artifacts had really been stolen, and that Rick was being charged for loose connections rather than clear acts. It was only a guess until the FBI raid in the morning of July 20, 2023. It was a terrible scene. Gun-toting agents in tactical gear stormed the property as if they were after a drug lord, and dozens of reporters camped outside as if they were waiting for a royal scandal to happen. Rick was caught right then and there, with his hands tied in front of a growing crowd. It only took an hour for his picture to be all over the news. His life started to fall apart after that. But the people who had cheered him on were the ones who turned their backs on him first. That hurt more than the fall itself. Former workers came forward in exclusive interviews and told personal stories. A former business partner went on a television news show and said Rick had been operating in a legal gray area for a long time. One person who used to be an examiner on the show even said that some of the high-value things had sketchy paperwork from the start. Still, Rick had millions of fans who watched Pawn Stars as a child and didn't see him as a thief but as someone who was abused of power. There were a lot of conspiracy ideas on YouTube and Reddit. Some people thought Rick had found something too valuable or politically sensitive and was being shut down, while others thought the government was using him as an example for a bigger plan. Rick hadn't said anything in public for months. Then there was the test. It was clear from the start that this would not be a normal hearing as the jury was being chosen. There were no cameras allowed in the courtroom, but records were leaked almost every day. Even though jurors were told not to talk about the case in public, there was a lot of casual conversation. The media turned into a show that couldn't be stopped. Fan groups camped out in front of the building every day with signs that said "No more pawns," "Rick is free," and "Justice for Harrison." The government's case was tough. They used detailed spreadsheets, transaction records, security footage, and old emails to paint a picture of a man who became greedy and cocky because he was successful. They made a map of the links between fake companies and deals that don't show up on the books and talked about items that were said to have been lost right after Rick bought them. The defense wasn't weak, though. They hired forensic accountants to question every number and detail. This showed that many of the transactions that seemed fishy could have actually been business growth, home improvements, or even gifts to charity. They pointed out problems with the investigation, such as the fact that a paid spy gave a tip, which could have changed the whole story. The important thing, they said, was that Rick may have messed up. But that mess-up wasn't a crime. If it was a mistake made by a person, not a crime. When Rick testified in the last week, everything changed. Reporters who were in the room say that everyone held their breath, but no cameras caught the moment. The Las Vegas Review-Journal said that Rick's voice made even the judge seem surprised by how emotional it was. Rick were sorry and that the show would no longer be made or aired. The show Pawn Stars, which ran for more than 10 years, was now over. Sales dropped, online shops got rid of related items, and tourists stopped coming. The place that used to be busy was now full of weeds and locked display cases. The discussion went on TV and on social media. Some experts said that a life term for a financial crime was too harsh. Some people said Rick's fame had been used as an excuse and that justice had been done. A federal prosecutor even said on TV that the term was too light considering how valuable the artifacts that were mishandled were. Rick was still the center of debate. Even though he was in jail, neither did he write, nor did he say anything. But his words and picture were on t-shirts, tattoos, and street art all over the place. Painters from New York to London made pictures of him with handcuffs and halos around his neck. They wrote papers about him. Pawn, The Rise and Fall of Rick Harrison, was made by a documentary team whose goal was to talk to everyone involved. Everything was still going on around Rick while he waited. Rick was still quiet. After Rick was sentenced, there was strange silence in some places and loud noise in others. People used to wait up to 4 hours to get into the gold and silver exchange shop, and there were lines of people buying souvenirs that went around the block. Now, the shop was empty. Even though the lights and signs were still on, the shop's spirit was gone. Gone was the man who could turn trash into gold and tell in an instant how much a Civil War sword was worth. People still came as tourists. While some were deeply interested, others did it out of habit. But the mood had changed. Behind the bar there was no smiles, no giggling, and no laughing. The workers kept their heads down, and the bright display items that used to line the walls, celebrity mugshots and rare historical items that Rick had personally chosen to show, had been taken down or covered with thick tarps and dust. The shop was no longer a celebration of the hard work of Americans. It was now a dream that had come true. Corey Harrison, Rick's son and a longtime co-star on Pawn Stars, had to be the face of a business that was falling apart. Corey learned how to run a business by sweeping floors as a child and worked his way up to become one of the store's best managers. But now that Rick was gone, Corey had to do something he never wanted to do: fix things. He was quiet at first, avoiding reporters, canceling events, and not responding to calls for interviews, but there was too much stress. It was said that the store was going to close. Some news sites even made guesses about Corey's role in the case. His name and his father's name were both in popular hashtags. Corey finally spoke out in a 10-minute video that he shared on social media. In it, he spoke straight to the people. He told me that my dad is not guilty. It doesn't matter to me what the court says. I've always worked with him. He wasn't a bad guy. He built things and taught. When no one else would, he gave people second chances. Also, he may have put his trust in the wrong people. He might not have kept as close an eye on every penny as he should have. But being flawed does not mean you are evil. Many people saw the tape that was taken in the pawn shop's back office. A lot of comments came in, some positive and some negative. Rick was cut off from everything while he was in Victorville jail. No internet means no information in real time. He only got legal texts and a few visits from family. Until Corey came along in the middle of September and told Dad through the glass, "There are people marching for you. A lot of people all over the world are not going to let this go." To which Rick responded, "After all, maybe something good will come out of all this." It was more than just sympathy that drove the effort. Lawyers started to speak out. There were calls for a new hearing. Some people wanted Congress to look into it. Some people wondered why the IRS was going after well-known people like Rick. Someone who used to be a federal judge said on the radio, "I've seen hundreds of first-time, nonviolent, fully cooperative financial cases, and no one got that sentence." This sentence is very harsh. However, not everyone was sure. Some people said Rick's fame made a blind echo chamber. The witnesses, financial records, shell companies, and offshore accounts were used as proof in court to make sure Rick got what he earned. One former lawyer said that justice doesn't serve a TV star. The people didn't seem to care about the details of the law, though. They knew the pain and the sadness. For many, Rick was more than just a businessman who had been found guilty. People saw him as a sign of the idea that luck and hard work could change things. It was like seeing that idea fall apart right in front of your eyes as you watched him sit in jail. The movement got stronger over time. Campaigns were started to raise money for an appeal. PawnJustice.org is a website that was made by fans. It has schedules, transcripts, expert analysis, and message boards where people could talk about how Rick inspired them. Teachers, soldiers, single moms, addicts in recovery, business owners, and more. The most unexpected support came from a big-name pop star who wore a Free Rick shirt on stage at a sold-out show. The picture went global, and 50 million posts used the hashtag. It wasn't just a one-time thing. It turned into a movement based on anger, doubt, and the hope that the system can be fixed when it goes wrong. The pawn shop closed down in Las Vegas. Corey's store reopened with a new name, Gold and Silver Legacy. People who worked there wore t-shirts that said "Still Standing." There was a small plaque where the statue of the old man used to be at the main door. For people who know what to do when they see one, the line started to come together again. Not quickly, but slowly. Some of them had homemade signs and t-shirts with grayscale pictures of Rick's face on them. They didn't just come to shop. They came to remember and keep the fire going. Rick Harrison's case is more than just a court case. The story shows that justice isn't always clear and that the people in the community are often the ones who should be asking the right questions. No matter what happened in the end, it has caused people to talk more about faith, duty, and what a